Good evening and welcome to our latest episode of the MACKMYRA Masterclass. My name's Mickey Plummer, and today's one is really, we're going to take a slightly different twist. I've got two non-industry guests with me, Steve Leadlaw and Stu McQueen. Good evening, gentlemen. How the devil are you, Steve? You good?
Yeah, great, thanks. Drinking on a school night, nothing better.
Happy days, brilliant. Thanks for joining us, my man. Stu, good evening, sir. How the devil are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Mickey. Thank you for the intro and the invite.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining me, guys. No, thanks a lot for joining me. So, it's going to be a little bit different. We're still going to have the same 5 drams, and we're still going to get a little bit of the information across as we would do. But it's going to be a bit more of a relaxed MACKMYRA in sort of vibe. We'll have a few chats between ourselves. Really invite a lot more questions and comments and that from you guys at home. We'll get Steve and Stu's opinions on the drams as well. So obviously these guys aren't affiliated with MACKMYRA, but hopefully I can say they've been long time fans of the brand. But I won't put words in their mouth. That's going to be all their opinions are going to be completely theirs. So we'll see how we get on. But for you, ladies and gentlemen at home, guys and girls at home, we do have our normal good MACKMYRA deal on for you. So this evening, up until midnight, if you use the code Stjärnrök 40 or Stjärnrök 40, buy a bottle of Stjärnrök from MACKMYRA.com and you'll get 40% off a bottle of the core range. Tonight, that's exactly what we're going to be covering. We're going to be covering the 4 core range, and the seasonal Stjärnrök. Okay, so that's 40% off until midnight tonight. We'll cover that again about halfway through, and then again to a little reminder for you at home. So, gents, Steve, when did you first hear about MACKMYRA?
For me, it was probably in the first few weeks of lockdown. Believe it or not, back then, whiskey companies didn't really do much digitally, and MACKMYRA seemed to react far quicker than most of the others. So I think you did shows every Wednesday then, and I kind of tied into that. And the tasting pack was, it was a decent value, $23.90 or something. It was just madness. So I kind of then tuned in every Wednesday, and because you were stuck at home, there wasn't that much more to do. It was a kind of no-brainer for me, and really it was probably within that. Had it not been for that, I'm not sure how close I would have been to the brand, but that's how I got into the core range, and then it's developed from there.
Perfect. No, that's great, Steve. And you're right. We were one of the first whiskey companies to take that digital roll on, and go, right, this is how we're going to reach more people while nobody can get out and about, So, Stu, same question to you. When did you first hear of MACKMYRA?
My first encounter with MACKMYRA was about 3 years ago in Stockholm. I was in
lovely. Right, okay.
I was in an embassy bar that belongs to another rival distillery, but they stocked lots of whiskies. And MACKMYRA being a Swedish one, I felt compelled to try some of the home brand, and really enjoyed it. And then the first tasting was in lockdown, a digital one as well.
Right, so no, it's good to hear that you both knew about us through the tastings. But Stu, obviously fantastic that you tried it at the home, and there's no really rival distilleries out there. We're all friends in the big world of whiskey. So obviously, for people that don't know, that's Ardbeg, the distillery that Stu didn't name. They've got embassy bars and embassy shops around the world, and that was the one in Stockholm there. So no, it's great that you've both got slightly different stories, but we're all drawn together now from this digital world, and it's nice to know that you both got involved in the digital online tasting. So way back at the beginning, we were very much like, is this going to work? Are people really going to tune in and watch? But like you said, the pack, 5 50ml drams and a glass, for less than 25 quid. So not only were we one of the first people to put a show like that out there, I think we were very, very competitively priced, if not industry-beating pricing at the time as well.
If I remember rightly, You kept selling out, Mickey.
Yeah, no, that's right. We did indeed, yeah, because we didn't anticipate the amount of take up. So that was really, really good as well, you know. And we've had peaks and troughs of it over the past 2 years, as you'd expect, with, you know, industry opening back up and then closing back down, and, you know, people weren't too sure what was happening here, there, and everywhere, like, you know. But and we've obviously, you know, since the world's opened back up, essentially, we're still plugging away, and we've got the masterclasses, and we're still getting a good amount of people join us as well, which is lovely, you know. And it is another really good way for people to experience a newer whiskey to them, yeah, without actually, you know, being there in person, and they can ask questions in the chat, and all that sort of good stuff without, or they can just take a back seat and nobody really notices without leaving the comfort of your own home, like, you know, which is always quite nice. So what we'll do, we'll get onto the drams. So tonight the order will be Mack, Brooks, Stjärnrök, Stjärnrök, and then Stjärnrök. Okay, we'll go in that order. Everybody at home, you've got 5 CL drams to pour. I'd recommend not pouring the whole 5 CL, because by the end of the hour, you could be slightly worse for wear. You pour it by all means. I'm not going to tell you how to drink your drink, but as a recommendation, obviously, drink quality, not quantity, and take it easy for the next hour. And then you can go back to the drams after in the bottle to sample at your own wish there. Good evening, Tamara. Long time flyer with us there, Big T. Great to have you with us, pal. So, yeah, so the first up would be Mack. So, Mack, as we all know, that distinctive, not quite Brooklady blue label by now, but, you know, not too far off. That's obviously a MACKMYRA blue, not the Brooklady blue. So 40%, very much entering. Retails for around about the £35 mark. It is chill filtered. It is color corrected, but we don't hide that from you. We tell you that on the back of the label on the big bottles. It will tell you at the bottom there that it will contains caramel coloring, and it is chill filtered. So we're not trying to hide it. It's literally chill filtration. E150A is there for aesthetic reasons only. It doesn't alter the taste, apparently. No, apparently it doesn't alter the taste. You could try this unchill filtered next. It's just great, quite frankly. So as Lisa just said there, she really enjoys Mack with cocktails. I highly recommend cocktails with this as well. An old-fashioned using Mack is phenomenal. Brings a nice little bit of sweetness to it and that as well. But yeah, Mack. What else can we say about Mack? So Mack was our very first wholly produced whiskey at the new Gravity Distillery. So we opened the Gravity Distillery. So as we go through, the story's going to be a bit jumping a little around about the place, really. And we'll cover the beginning of the story on dram number 2. But the midway part, or the latest part of the story, is the Gravity Distillery. 35 meters tall. Got a sky bar at the top, so you can have a lovely dram and a bite to eat overlooking the forest of Gävle, where the distillery is. So to put Gävle into context, if you know where Stockholm is, you go for about a drive for about an hour and a half north, slightly east from Stockholm. You'll get to there you go. You'll get to Gävle, or most likely just north, slightly west if you want to do it that way. Yeah, I thought Stockholm was in a little bit further, but my geography for an ex-Navy man, my geography is horrendous. Another frequent flyer. Good evening, Bully. How the devil are you, sir? So yeah, so up in Gävle, 35 meters tall. Now we make whiskey, yeah, in a very traditional manner. Yeah, we mill it, we mash it, yeah, we ferment it, we distill it, we fill it into oak casks, and then put it into a warehouse for a minimum of 3 years. So all that sounds very familiar to people that have done that know about whiskey, that have done distillery tours before, and all that sort of good stuff. But how do we do that slightly differently at MACKMYRA? Well, that whole process we talked about normally happens from left to right or right to left. Yeah, we actually do it from top to bottom. Yeah, and what do I mean by that? We convey the malted barley up to the top floor or just underneath the top floor. Yeah. And then to move everything to the next level, we use the power of gravity. So we open a valve and let it fall down to the next part of the process, as opposed to starting pumps and all that sort of good stuff. So what does that mean? We're the most climate friendly, greenest distillery in the world at the moment in operation. So when we did our trials, when we first set up in 2011 into 2012, we were actually 45% more efficient than we were at the Brooks distillery, our first proper grown-up distillery, just that couple of years beforehand. And for me, that's a no-brainer, really. I mean, I think that's just quite frankly phenomenal. We're the world's first gravity or vertical distillery, as it were. Some distilleries around the world do use parts of their production process. They do use gravity, but not fully. And there's one currently under build in Leith, in the Port of Leith, just outside of Edinburgh, up in Scotland, by the Port of Leith distillers. They're building the world's second gravity distillery or vertical distillery, as it were. So that's enough about the technical side of it for the minute. Let's get into the dram. So, guys, you've both had Mac before, haven't you, Steve?
Yeah, I have. It always reminds me, when I was a kid, one opal fruit was never enough, so I'd open 4 or 5 and jam them together, put them all in my mouth at once, and that's what this tastes like, just like that, the mixture of fruits.
That genuinely, right? I've been doing this a little while now, right? And many tastings. That's the first time someone's ever compared it to like 4 or 5 opal fruits smashed together. And do you know what? I love it. I wish I'd known about that one sooner. Oh, fantastic! What are your initial thoughts, Stu, on Mac when you approach Mac?
Well, the smell, it's always got a fruity smell on it. It's nice, easy going, but I also go back to childhood sweets a little bit, although I can safely say I've never gone for the opal fruit mashup. But pear drops, I get a lovely pear sensation in the mouth off this one. When you hold it in your mouth just a few seconds and swirl it around a bit and just taste it in your mouth. And for me, I always get this lovely sweet pear flavour off it, and I really like it. It's a really easy drinking dram.
It certainly is. 40%. So you're not getting an alcohol burn from that. Well rounded, and so all that sweetness, guys, to put in the picture. I don't know if you know. You listened to me before that, obviously, but if you picked up on this, to let everybody else know, the cask makeup for Mac is solely virgin and first fill American oak, and the previous contents to that was virgin, and we filled it with MACKMYRA beforehand. So the only liquid that's ever touched these casks has been MACKMYRA new make. So we've got virgin American oak, which obviously has had no liquid in it previously, and then first fill American oak. And he said first fill virgin oak. Then I mean, like, that doesn't even make any sense. and first fill American oak, and that had previously had MACKMYRA liquid in it previously. So what do we know about that? So if we think about bourbons, etc., which only use virgin American oak, we know they contain a lot of sweetnesses and are quite dark in colour. Now the colour in Mac obviously comes from the addition of E150, not a lot of it. And it's just to make sure that the product looks the same no matter where it is in the world. It doesn't add anything to the flavour whatsoever. And we say, but people go, I can taste the caramel. No, that's coming from the influence of that virgin and that first fill American oak. So like I said, if we think about the bourbons that we know, and some people love and some people not so keen, but what we know about bourbon is it's got an intense sweetness to it. Yeah, and that's where a lot of those flavor compounds are going to come from to bring that sweetness, that caramel, that vanilla flavoring to the fore. So Stu, do you like a bourbon occasionally?
The occasional bourbon passes the lips. I tend to stick with the Scotch whiskey, but bourbon comes in now and again. And like you said Mac makes a good old fashioned. That's obviously tying in with those bourbon links.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that is it. It's all that's different between this and a bourbon, really. Obviously, temperature and climate. Sweden's slightly different than Tennessee when it comes to like a temperature profile. But no, and obviously the only other difference as well is the mash bill. So obviously 100% malted barley's gone into this. There's no corn, no maize, no nothing like that gone into this. So the big similarities there is the casks used. So virgin American oak, you're going to get a lot of those sweetnesses drawn in from the wood sugars in the oak, and that become a little bit more apparent later on as we have a few more drams and the differences in oaks and stuff like that as well. So you're going to get a lot of similarities. So all your good bourbon cocktails that people know and love, Mac is a really good replacement for that bourbon. You know, whether you're into like a Sazerac or anything like that, you know, especially in old fashion's the one that always springs to mind when you talk about like bourbon cocktails or whiskey cocktails, etc. But I really quite like this. So there's a more upmarket high street supermarket that has a food hall. They do a sparkling apple and pear juice. Yeah, a nice house measure of Mac in a highball glass over some ice, topped up with that sparkling apple and pear juice, and then just use like a chunk of pear or a chunk of like Granny Smith or something like that as a garnish for the top. Warm, sunny days and that are really nice, really refreshing, good bit of sweetness, but also that apple and pear really lends itself well to the Mac because of the DNA that MACKMYRA contains, really. So what's your Steve? What's your sort of like go-to cocktail then if you're going to go down that sort of road?
I'm not a big drinker of cocktails. I think the old fashioned's a standard one, and it's a bit of a boring answer. But that's what I've liked in the past. Where I've tried that, and I've normally tried it on distillery tastings. The Bimba one springs to mind. They give you that at the start. That was one of the first try, and I've kind of sticked with it there. So the nice, simple old fashioned for me.
Yeah, you know, it's not an overly complicated drink. It really shows off the spirit quite well, but in a bit more of a relaxed, slightly sweeter way. Like you said, it is one of those go-to answers or whatever like that when you're talking about whiskey-based cocktails. But there's a reason for that. Do you know what I mean? It's well loved, easy to make, and sometimes a little bit too easy to drink.
Yeah.
For sure. So, if there's any questions, ladies and gentlemen, at home about Mac or about MACKMYRA in general, get them in and we'll move on to the next dram. So, if we're ready, and I don't want to be forcing anybody, but the next dram up, what we're going to do is now we're going to move on to Brooks Vintage. Oh, yeah, Whiskey Sour or Rob Roy. Yeah, beautiful, Lisa. See, Lisa's a frequent flyer with us as well. It's great to have her with us again this evening. The reason I handle is Cocktails with Lisa because she knows and does a lot with cocktails. So it's always quite great to have her on to make some cocktail suggestions as well. So thank you very much for that, Lisa. Appreciate it. So the Brooks I'm pouring is going to be slightly different to the Brooks you guys are pouring, Steve and Stu, and you ladies and gentlemen at home that have got the tasting packs as well. So you've got the original Brooks, or the Blue Label Brooks as we're calling it at the moment. That's the one. And I've got its slightly older brother, sister, sibling, whatever you want to call it. And it's actually its replacement. And that's the Brooks Whiskey Vintage 2008. I can just about remember my tasting notes from original Brooks. So the reason Brooks Whiskey features in our core range is it's literally the foundation of MACKMYRA. So a bottle of the Brooks Whiskey Blue Label is actually in the foundations of the Gravity Distillery. I mean, how cool is that? MACKMYRA as it goes forward is literally built on Brooks Whiskey, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. So Brooks was made originally in fact, even this liquid was made in our MACKMYRA Brook distillery in the village of MACKMYRA. And there it is. That was our first proper grown-up distillery we moved into in 2002. So obviously MACKMYRA was conceptualized in 1998 by 8 friends that went to university together. And then when they left university, they used to meet up every year. And in 1998, they all brought a bottle of whiskey to dinner with them. So the conversation over dinner went along the lines of, well, why isn't there a Swedish single malt distillery? We've got everything we need. We've got great barley. We've got a fantastic water source. We can access our own yeast, everything, even our own peat. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So after that, why isn't there? They said, well, let's do it. Let's literally put our heads together and let's make Sweden's first single malt distillery. So that was great. So a year later, after much traveling and research, on the 18th of December, 1999, the very first drops of MACKMYRA liquid flowed from a hand-built 100-litre still. That was the replacement for the 100-litre still. That was our new stills when we moved to MACKMYRA Bruk. So the first 3 years of making, we were like diving about in research and development, really, and producing liquid off a 100-litre still. And then we thought, actually, this is going pretty well. We're getting some attention, so we moved to MACKMYRA Bruk opened MACKMYRA Bruk in 2002, where we had delivered what you saw there, the 10,000-litre wash still and an 8,000-litre spirit still from Forsyths in Scotland. That in American oak cask is probably about the only non-Swedish thing that's involved in the production of MACKMYRA whiskey. So as they drove forward, there's 3 things, the 3 pillars of MACKMYRA that they always try and strive to stick to. And that is Swedishness. So we've got 100% Swedish ingredients, yeah? Swedish barley, Swedish water, Swedish yeast, Swedish peat, and Swedish oak, and all that sort of stuff when we come on to that in a little bit. Innovation. Yeah, and we'll talk about innovation as we go forward. So they're the first Swedish distillery, with currently the biggest Swedish distillery and the oldest Swedish distillery, obviously. And the last one is sustainability. So like I said, yeah, we're now in the Gravity distillery. We're 45% more efficient than we were at MACKMYRA Bruk. But we'll talk about some more sustainable efforts as we go through. It all comes down to things like recycled glass for the bottles, the corks on the main big bottles. The top of the stopper is actually made from recycled casks. On the Moments range, it's actually made from recycled cask hoops. So, there's that big sustainable effort involved in that in there as well. So that's really the first part of the next part of the story. So we're there or thereabouts. Stu, do you have any questions so far about anything MACKMYRA-ish?
So, we had the first one, and obviously you've got a volume there of 40%. This one's that little bit stronger. What makes them decide on the profiles of these different strengths of the whiskies?
That's a great question. I actually get asked a lot because I think the key thing with this one is we are stepping up from 40%, but we're only going up to 41.4. And that makes a lot of people scratch their heads in all fairness. Well, why 41.4? So we keep it below 46% and as low. So it has to be 40% or above to be called a whiskey. So we're sticking to the rules there. So all of our stuff is above 40% to be a whiskey. But also we've got to think about things like tax, outturn, and all that sort of stuff. And that's what basically dictates your prices. So if your ABV is too high, you have to pay more tax on it. Therefore, your product is going to be too expensive for what we wanted. So with Mac, it was designed to be exactly where it is, designed with the bartender in mind, designed to be a very easy drinker, easily accessible. And it's the same with Brooks. The Brooks are designed to be easily accessible, but in more of a single malt context. So to do that, you need to keep it below the 46 mark and above 40. And where it really sort of shone with the Cask Makeup, which I'll talk about in a minute, was at 41.4. There was a lot of R&D, research and development that went in to reaching that. So Brooks didn't work down at 40, and it was too expensive over 43, basically. So a nice a nice happy medium between the accountants and the people that are going to pay the money for the whiskey, was at 41.4, really. And that's, a lot of people, you should only ever do cash strength whiskey, this and that. And there's places for that. There's 100% places for that, without a doubt. But also, you need to make good whiskey at an affordable price for people to buy it. And a lot of that is dictated, unfortunately, by the taxman. So we won't boo the taxman live on air because, nobody wants to be investigated and stuff. So that's hopefully that answers your question, Stu.
Oh, it does. You could taste the step up. It's only a tiny increase, but you could taste the step up. There's a little bit more kick, a little bit more alcohol flavour to that one as well.
So not only that, but the cask makeup for this is massively changed as well. So from Mac, we've only dealing with one type of cask, and that was American oak, whether that be virgin or first fill. But with Brooks whiskey, so the cask makeup is exactly the same as it was in Brooks. Brooks Whiskey Blue Label, in Brooks Whiskey the Orange Label, in Brooks Whiskey Deluxe that we released at the moment earlier on last year, and Brooks Whiskey Deluxe 2, which we released in the late part of last year. So all 4 Brooks whiskies are exactly the same cask makeup, with just some slight differences, whether that be age or the type of spirit that went into those casks. But predominantly, we're looking at ex-bourbon casks. 200-litre ex-bourbon casks. We've got 100-litre Swedish oak cask involved. There's a 120-litre ex-Oloroso cask involved as well. And there's 3/4 of a 200-litre cask of what contains and what we call our smoke tail recipe. So if you do get a small hint of smoke on Brooks, that's why. There is a very, very small hint. So smoke tail, once we've done a peated run, where we're going to get our peated whiskey from, and we'll talk about that when we get up onto dram 4 and 5. A lot of distilleries will then close for like a maintenance period, basically. We don't. We'll then put through an unpeated liquid for that first run and put that into 200-litre ex-bourbon casks and mark with a big X on the front of them. And that's our smoke tail casks or smoke tail recipe. And our master blender will use them like a chef will use salt and pepper. So if you think a dish is lovely and it's got all the ingredients you want, but it needs zipping up a little bit or it needs something slightly different, then we'll add in some portion of our smoke tail recipe. So that's how you're going to tell a lot of differences there. Is because it is a massive change from just one sort of single cask influence to now you've got 4, 5 different sort of cask influences going on at the same time.
Yeah, it's got a lovely peppery, spicy aftertaste. This one that I like.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that on dram number 3, where that aftertaste is going to come from. But on the blue one, on the blue label that you guys have got now, there's one tasting note, and I'll go back to what you two said about like childhood sweets. So for me, for Brooks, it's foam bananas. So the old 5p sweets. I don't know what they are. Probably about £3 now or something. I don't know. But those. So for me on Brooks Blue Label, it's the foam bananas, 100% all the way every day. And at the beginning of last year, I think it was our first or second show last year, I actually served Brooks whiskey from the freezer. Just a complete one-off experiment. Now, I'm not, like I've said before, I'm not going to try and claim that I invented serving whiskey out the freezer because, well, we both know, we all know that I'd be lying if I said that, There's been others that have done that design for the freezer serve before, but I thought I would try it with Brooks because it's got that nice lightness about it. And I thought, well, let's try and do something a little bit different. And I did. And, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I'm yet to try it with the Brooks Vintage. I'll give that a bash soon. But yeah, it was so. I think the big key there is play with your whiskey. Do you know what I mean? In a responsible manner, obviously. Have to be a good person to say in a responsible manner. But no, whiskey's there to be enjoyed. So, Steve, what's the weirdest way you've ever had a whiskey served to you?
I have
Keep
had
it
it where it's, yeah, I have had it where it's actually been frozen. So I've kind of almost had to warm it with my hands.
Okay.
And one question I would ask about what you did you find it closed the flavour down at all? Because I don't know if I kind of assumed it had, but I really struggled with it, the drink I had, and it was abroad, and it wasn't a great whiskey, but it was crushed, but it was still ice, and there was a couple of blocks in. Apart from it taking half an hour to melt, so it took that long to drink. But I didn't get much from it when it did melt.
Yeah, no, so that is one thing. So obviously that process there will make your whiskey go a lot thicker, a lot more viscous for your mouthfeel. And I really quite like it for that reason. But it does close up a lot of the flavors. And that's just because of science, basically. So all these esters that we talk about when we describe, or all these flavor profiles and tasting notes we talk about when we're discussing that, comes from like oils and fats within the whiskey that come from the production process, and so with that, when you freeze them up, you sort of take those out of the equation. So it's a bit like what happens with chill filtering. You do take a lot of that away with chill filtering, but when you serve from the freezer, obviously the intensity on the profile gets bigger. By mouthfeel, it gets bigger, but the flavors do drop off quite a bit. But if you let it sit, and you let it sit in your mouth for a little while as well, you'll start to notice the flavor profile changing as that whiskey starts to get a bit warmer. So if you were to look at like a tasting note sheet, and you knew most of you were familiar with most of the tastes on that tasting note sheet, you'll start to recognize them one by one as that whiskey starts to get a little bit warmer. So as that starts to get warmer, those flavor compounds or those esters start to become a bit more released through the whiskey. Yeah, and so you'll start to taste them at different points of different temperatures until it gets to room temperature, and then you're all up with the whiskey and that again. So when you tried it first of all out the freezer, Steve, it's all going to be very, very closed up, and it's more about the mouthfeel than anything else really.
Yeah, it isn't something I'd rush to be doing again. Room temperature is the way for me, I think.
Yeah. But like you said, you're in a hotter climate, and sometimes room temperature in a hotter climate is like having a cup of tea when you're trying to drink a whiskey, isn't it? That's not always nice. Right. So, any more, gents? Any questions more about Brooks or MACKMYRA in general? Something.
I've got one, Mickey. You mentioned the almost ahead of its time distillery, Gravity Fed, and you mentioned you could get a meal and have a drink at the bar at the top. If I was across that way, could I get a tour there? Do they do tours?
Yeah, so at the Gravity Distillery, there is a visitor centre, as you would know and love, with a gift shop and a restaurant and a bar, etc. You can't buy the drams there because of Swedish licensing laws, etc. But you can have a nice meal there. You get a tour and all that sort of good stuff. But you can. Yeah, there's a visitor centre there. So if you're in Gävle, you could go to MACKMYRA Whiskey Village and do that. In fact, there is a trip coming up soon. So if you all go on to mackmyra.com and go to events, I believe it's in events. Matt will probably flash up the link in a minute once he finds it, because I've just put him on the spot now. He has to do some work, like big fingers of fire. But no, in May, I can't remember the dates, but in May, we're actually running a trip to the distillery. So you would fly yourself from the UK over to Sweden, and then we'd sort of like pick you up, take you up to the distillery, give you a tour, hotel overnight, and a wee trip to the forest warehouse as well. So if you have a look at that, I can't remember we weren't going to talk about this, but since you brought it up, Steve, if you have a look on mackmyra.com and look at the events page, you'll be able to find a few more details and that about it on there. So a fully functioning visitor centre.
Is that the mine when you said about the warehouse? Is that the mine?
No, the Budas mine is not open to visitors, unfortunately. But we have got the forest warehouse, which is right. So The Budas mine is a bit of a distance from the distillery itself, whereas the forest warehouse isn't. It's literally a couple of minute walk from the distillery to the forest warehouse. So if you were to like go over, buy your own 30-litre cask, you could fill it yourself, pop it on your shoulder, and walk it to its resting place in the forest warehouse. Give it a wee kiss goodnight and that. Read it a wee bedtime story, etc. So that's something that can be done as well. So moving on to dram number 3. Dram number 3 this evening is where they start to get really quite Swedish. Oh, brilliant. So there we go. So the link, Matt's just told me, the link is in the chat on Facebook and on YouTube. There you go, guys. The link is in the chat there for the tour event that I was just speaking about. Awesome. Thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate that. So yeah, Svensk Gek. This is where we start to get really Swedish. So this is probably a really ridiculous question. But Stu, what does Svensk Gek mean?
I have absolutely no idea.
In all the tastings you've been to with me, right? I've said it in every single one of them. Steve, can you embarrass Stu for me?
I personally blame it on the fact that you serve too many large drams before I get to this point.
I'm not 100% sure, but I'm not 100% sure, but I'd guess Swedish oak.
Absolutely spot on, word for word, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So yes, Svensk Gek, Swedish oak. Now you're going to notice a massive, massive difference in this, guys, at home, and you use both as well. But you two pretty much know it anyway. So we're jumping up from 41.4 all the way up to 46.1, non-chill filtered, natural color. And an absolute fantastic dram. And one of the reasons why it's such is because of its cask makeup. Okay, so we mentioned it's 46.1. We mentioned its natural color. We mentioned it's non-chill filtered. Okay, so the cask makeup for this is literally just ex-bourbon and virgin Swedish oak. So we take a batch of liquid that's been matured in ex-bourbon for about 6 to 7 years. And then we take 10% of that batch, and we further mature it for a minimum of 18 months in virgin Swedish oak. Okay, so Swedish oak has got a lot less wood sugars in it than American oak does. So when we spoke about Mac at the beginning, we were talking about how quite sweet it was, how we were getting those sweet notes and that from this. Well, with Svensk Gek, you get that a little bit on the front of the palate, but as soon as you start to swallow, you get a nice big hit of like white pepper, sandalwood, leather, that type of thing. And that's just that 10% influence, from the Swedish oak. So because of the harsher conditions that Swedish oak grows in, it doesn't have the luxury of growing up in lovely warm areas of America. So it's a variant of a European oak, and it grows up a lot in a harsher condition. And so it's got a lot less wood sugars in it than American oak does. Okay, so that's where you're going to start to get that white pepper, that sandalwood, that dark chocolate on the finish, that sort of influence from. So Stu, what are your thoughts on Svensk Gek? What with it being our sort of like flagship dram, as it were?
I love this stuff. It is my go-to in the MACKMYRA range. It's got that lovely spicy pepperiness that on the tongue. It's got a lovely syrupy viscosity in the mouth, and it just has a lovely long aftertaste that really works. And if you put a tiny drop of water in it, it opens it up a little bit more because it's that non-chill filtered. It can take release a few of those oils, but it is a really lovely dram. It's my go-to.
Mate, yeah, for sure. And so many things can be done with this as well. It's phenomenal because it's 46.1, because it is non-chill filtered. It's nice, big, robust whiskey that can be played with. And for ladies and gentlemen at home, like Stu said, he enjoys adding a dash of water. And when he says that, he literally means a drop of water, nothing more than that.
Nothing more.
knocks that spiciness down just that little touch, yeah, and allows some more of those fruity esters to really come to the front. If you don't have a pipette, use a sports bottle lid, or some people, obviously as long as your own glass, etc., will dip their finger into their water and have a little drop hanging off their finger, and knock like a little drop of water from their finger into their dram, if you're that way inclined. But, not everybody walks around with pipettes. I don't know what's wrong with those people that don't, but you never know. So because of the robustness of this, I really do quite enjoy this in a good few cocktails. And one of probably the one I go to most often, I'm not going to say I invented it, but obviously I invented the MACKMYRA version of it, is the Black Manhattan. So a Black Manhattan is normally 2 parts of a rye whiskey, 1 part of Monte Negro, and 2 dashes of bitters, served in a chilled champagne coupe. And it's a stir down as opposed to a shaken cocktail. I just replaced the rye with the svensk, and I think that works really well. And it keeps to that sort of flavour profile you're going to get from a rye, really, because with a rye whiskey, you do get quite a bit of pepperiness on the palate, which the svensk does lend to it as well. So for that, 2 parts svensk, 1 part of Monte Negro, 2 dashes of orange bitters, and I use an orange peel twist as a garnish for that, and it's just fantastic, quite frankly. So what's Tamara saying? Tamara loves the svensk. It's got white pepper, young walnut, dark chocolate, bit of Manuka honey, nice, and licorice. Yeah. I don't know precisely if it's Manuka honey, but then I've not had a lot of experience with Manuka honey. So see, and this is why I love other people's tasting notes, because as we all know, people have different experiences of food and of drink and etc. And what individual people get from a particular dram to what someone else gets is just phenomenal, quite frankly. So, Steve, what are your thoughts on the svensk, sir?
Yeah, I like this. I think I've got it written down here, and you used the word, it's robust, isn't it? It's a bit more spiky. The first 2 were soft and tasty. This one's kind of a bit more in your face. You kind of get it on the front and back of your tongue. And that what I really like about it is the mouthfeel. Stuart mentioned it, but I get a little bit of mint on either side of my tongue.
Yeah,
that's very different, and that mint, and it kind of that transitions into the finish. That's really nice.
Yeah. A few people have said about that mint thing. I believe it's also in the official tasting notes for svensk as well, on the product sheet with mint and that on the back of the palate and in the finish. Yeah. So no, that's great. I get a bit of like I always try to say methanol when I mean menthol. You don't want to be tasting methanol in your whiskey in general, really. Unless you're into that sort of thing, You'll find no judgment from me on that one. You'll find no judgment from me on that. But no, ladies and gents, please let us know at home. What's one of your favourite whiskies you enjoy in a cocktail, and what is that cocktail? I talk about them quite a bit on my social medias and stuff like that. And when I do these, it's because I think it's important. Not everybody just wants to sit down with a dram all the time. There's times and places for just doing that, and that's brilliant. But other times you want a drink, but you don't necessarily want to sit down with just a dram. You want to change it up a little bit, whether that's because you're having a few drinks while you're doing a barbecue, or you got some pounds round and you don't want to be like just absolutely steamboats after a couple of drams, and you're going to be a bit more sociable with it and just have a bit more fun and bring something different to it. So I'm not bothered how you drink your whiskey. Personally, as long as you're drinking whiskey, it's a big thumbs up from me, really. So yeah. So Stu, what would it be like your favourite long cocktail with a whiskey?
Penicillin is my favourite whiskey cocktail. I really like that. I like the ginger in it. It works well with a good, strong, peaty whiskey as well. It's got lots of peppery notes as well. Svensesk is not particularly peaty, but it's got lots of that spice and pepper that works well with ginger and things like that. But yeah, that's penicillin's my go-to in terms of a
dram number 5. Dram number 5 might be of interest to you then Stu, for your next penicillin concoction potentially.
We'll have to give it a whirl.
We'll give it a go and see what you think to that one. What about yourself, Steve? What's your favourite sort of like? Think more like a longer cocktail, like you cook in the barbecue, you're out in the garden in the summer, sort of thing.
I think if I was doing that, and I can almost hear the collective moan, I'd go just with a very straightforward smoky cokey and just a little bit of peated whiskey, and then top it up with Coke. You can't go far wrong with that.
It's a massively underrated cocktail. And like you said, Steve, you can hear almost a collective sigh and a groan up and down the length and breadth of the country going, oh, for God's sake, not what are you doing? But no, do you know what? It's really freaking enjoyable, and it does put that another dimension onto it. And do you know what? Why not? Why not? So a fellow brand ambassador back in the day, we went for a couple of drinks on a nice sunny day in Glasgow. We were in the pot still, the famous pot still. And the gentleman in question is a fan of the brand as well, Shilton Amida. You guys will know Shilton as well. And he introduced me to, it was a peated whiskey, in a highball glass over ice, topped up with ginger ale with a twist of orange peel as the garnish, and using the zest in that on the top. And it was really quite a warm day, not just for Glasgow, but the UK in general at the time. And oh man, I didn't stop drinking those all summer. That was just fantastic for me. Do you know what I mean? Just that little tiny bit of that smoke coming through. But people were like, a peated whiskey in the summer? Well, yeah, that's how you drink a peated whiskey in the summer. Topped up with some over ice, topped up with some ginger ale. Just because it's got that nice lightness bit of the ginger about it, and with that slightly tropical orange twist in that on the top. It was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. It's now a big go-to one. Oh my lord, Matt, can you put Lisa's up, please? That's I don't know. Is it the right time to put Lisa's one up? Jeez, believe it or not, I made a trouser rouser. Just that name in general, that's phenomenally. Thank you. For a Valentine's menu, that's a good barbecue one. Okay, cool. So at least you're going to have to let us know what's in a trouser rouser. That sounds interesting. I really want to know about that one now. Oh dear. But no, so yeah. So Svensk Ek, 46.1, lovely bit of body to it, great bit of spice to finish us off. On the back of the palate there, and a really good flagship dram from us, I think. And this is people change up their core ranges quite a lot, but I think as far as us, Svensk Ek is staying around for a good while to come yet, and I'm more than happy with that situation. Right, so for dram number 4. This is where we really, really get quite funky and twist with your minds now. We're going to take into the seasonal dram that's in your packs. And that is Stjärnrök. Star Smoke. So it's not Stjärnrök or anything like that, or Stjärnrok. It's pronounced Stjärnrök. When I first saw this, and obviously, working for MACKMYRA for the past couple of years, we've had some drams that have been available that have really, really worked out the face and the tongue muscles to try and pronounce, and most of them, don't look like they sound like they sound either. And this is by no means any different to that, really. When you try and pronounce it, you'd think it's like Stjärnrök or something like that, and yeah. Most people sort of know what you're about, but no. It is pronounced Stjärnrök. No, I don't either watch. Pronounced Stjärnrök. And it is, so again, we're up at 46.1. So 46.1 is what I would call the MACKMYRA magic number. It's where our master blender realizes that our spirit shines the best. regardless of the casks that it's been in. So the seasonal range retails for around about the £62 mark, and this is a good time to remind you all of the deal we're running this evening until midnight as well. If you go to MACKMYRA.com and you enter the code Stjärnrök40, you'll buy a bottle of Stjärnrök and you'll get 40% off a bottle of any of the core range. Okay, so the core range is the other 4 whiskies that we're trying tonight. And this one is the star of the show, as it were. So Stjärnrök 40 or Stjarnrok 40, and you'll buy a bottle of Stjärnrök and get 40% off any bottle of the core range. Yeah. So 46.1 non-chill filtered natural color again, and this for me personally is the best seasonal we've ever done since 2013. I'll get your guys' opinions on it in a moment. Let me just tell you about the cask recipe for this particular one. So, no, the numbers aren't exact. They're just roughs because it can get a bit too mental. So roughly 60% of this recipe has come from ex-bourbon and 30-litre ex-Oloroso casks. Yeah, and that's from that 60% of casks contains our peated and our extra peated liquid. 35% has come from some of our older ex-bourbon casks and some American oak as well to give it a bit more of a spine. And the final 5% has come from whiskey that has been matured in cloudberry wine seasoned Swedish oak. So that's quite the cask makeup, isn't it? Really. What do you think to that, Steve?
Yeah, I found it quite surprising. On the nose, I didn't get a lot of smoke, and then my first impression was, wow, there's a lot on the palate. But then that subsides, and you start to get a bit of chocolate orange in and a bit of honey glazed ham, and then it kind of finished off with a bit more appley, apricotty. So it kind of takes you on a bit of a journey. It's certainly the most complex one we've had tonight. There's more going on in this than there was in the others.
Awesome. Dude, before I get your opinion, Matt, if you can flash up Lisa's recipe for a trouser rouser. So if anybody at home wants to screenshot that now or go back to the comments or whatever, it's whiskey, creme de banane, mango juice, pineapple juice, lime juice, and a dash of egg white. Can't remember the exact measures. I'd probably go for more of like a 40, 20, 10, 10, 5 with a bit of egg white. And obviously, because it's got the egg white in it, I take it that would be a shaken. So shake all that up without ice, then add ice, shake it up, and pour that into a chilled glass of choice. But that sounds very, very tropical. Very tropical indeed. And what the egg white will do is give you a nice creaminess and a nice like foam head on your cocktail, basically. Yeah, no, that sounds lovely, Lise. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Phenomenal. That just sounds really interesting, doesn't it? Right, anyway, back to the Stjärnrök stew, our first smoky one of the evening. What are your feelings on this one, sir?
Well, like Steve said, when you get the nose, it's not overly smoky. You've got lots of lovely berries and those winter berries, like that Christmas cake smell going on, and sweetness of that. But there's a hint of leather there as well. You get a good leather and tobacco type smell on the background. Not saddle leather though. Just
I was going to say any particular type of leather, Sen.
No, just the leather, just the leathery tobacco-y smell, not old saddle leather. And but when you taste it, that's when all that lovely smoke comes through, and it's weird because it comes at you in waves. You get like a smokiness and the berries coming at you, and then you get that cherry flavors coming through on the palate, and it's got such a lovely long palate. When you take it in, you hold it in your mouth a little, you can really get all those flavors coming out. But they just seem to come one after the other in waves, and it's just it sits lovely on the palate.
Yeah, and this for me is my perfect sort of like start of the rugby season dram. until we until we get into about March, depending on the weather.
We're not allowed to talk about rugby. We're not allowed to talk about rugby after this weekend.
Well, mate, see, obviously that's a difficult game for me to watch, Stu. Do you know what I mean? Being an Englishman, living in Glasgow, and a season ticket holder for Glasgow Warriors and at Murrayfield for Scotland games, yeah. Once every 2 years, I get to wear my England shirt at Murrayfield, right? And just like, obviously, everyone that surrounds me at my season ticket seat just like gives me dog's abuse. And it's fantastic. But yeah, no, you're right, Nate. The less said about that game, the better for the three Englishmen on screen at the moment. Oh dear, but no. So you think of like that sort of that time of the year. We'll go for Bully's comment. Stjärnrök is amazing, complex dram. Normally have to be in the mood for a smoky dram, but this is dangerously Moorish. Yeah, I agree. And at 46.1, you've got to be a bit more careful. You know, it's not a 40%er that you could like tan most of the bottle of and get away with it. This is really gonna cause you some serious damage, like, you know. Before you know it, you're a third of the bottle's gone. You got to go for a pee and someone's stolen your legs. You know?
I know what Bully means by you got to be in the mood for a smoky dram. I'm the same. I've got to be in the mood for it. It's normally on days ending in Y.
And everybody was sat at home thinking, why has Mickey got these two on for the masterclass? Ladies and gentlemen, this is why.
It's bang on though. It is a complex one, isn't it? Like I said, it's coming at you in waves. It's lovely.
Yeah, and you know we've had some fantastic seasonals come in. You know, Appleblom with the Christian Joan Calvados casks, Grand Thé with the you know the Japanese green tea. You know, just to name two unusual ones. You know, this is a bit more mainstream, as it were. I use the word mainstream quite loosely, obviously, because it's MACKMYRA at the end of the day. But yeah, so it's a bit more of those casks that we're familiar with, you know, the Swedish oak, some cloudberry wine, so we'll go for that wine finish, you know, ex-bourbon, American oak. So, you know, an ex-Oloroso cask. So there's familiar words being used, yeah, but with a really unfamiliar dram resulting from that. But unfamiliar in a good way, though. What do you reckon, Steve?
Yeah, I'm not normally drawn to peated whiskies. I'm not a big peated fan. But I just think as long as they're balanced and as long as there's other things happening and you don't just get whacked in the face with a peat, then it works. And I think that's one of the strengths of that dram. There's peat's there, don't get me wrong, and it's there and you can, you know, it's loud and proud, but there's other things happening. So you're not focusing on the smoke. There's other things that are feeding into it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's a really good segue into dram number 5. So our last dram of the evening, dram number 5, is Stjärnrök. Just sort of shelves back out again, as I'm going to end up with piles of bottles in front of me. So Stjärnrök. Stu, I'm going to give you another shot. What does Stjärnrök mean?
Swedish.
Yep. So we had the rook in Stjärnrök.
This demonstrates I haven't cheated and researched.
But also it upsets me because that means you've just not listened to anything I've said on any tastings that you've ever been on with mine.
Sorry, what was that, mate?
Exactly. So
it's even written on the back of the bottle.
Oh, now come on, now you're showing me up. Swedish smoke.
There you go. So if anybody at home didn't guess that, it's Swedish smoke. So Rök, we had obviously star smoke on dram number 4. So that was Stjärnrök, so star smoke. So we can all guess now that Rök means smoke. So again, 46.1, natural colour, non-chill filtered. We're probably the only one of 12, I believe it's 12. Nobody's corrected me in the last 2 years. I've been saying 12, so I'm going to stick with 12. One of only 12 distilleries in the world that still floor malt and smoke our own barley on site. So we normally buy in our malted barley from Viking Maltings. but they don't have a peat, and they don't have a peating process. They don't have a smoking process. So we'll take batches of barley off them, unmalted barley off of them, and we will floor malt and smoke our own barley in our own smoker on site at the distillery. Like I said, we're one of only 12 distilleries in the world that still do that. And for any peat geeks out there, we actually smoke to 60 ppm. Yeah. So all your Isla guys and stuff like that hang around the mid 40s, very, very early 50s, if that. Yeah. We kick them in the butt when it comes to smoking, apart from the one obvious one, which is just a freak of nature into a law unto itself, any road. Yeah, you've got one to do up there, right? So apart from that one, obviously we beat the majority of people out there. However, and like Stu and Steve have said, you don't get that punch in the face from the smoke from MACKMYRA whiskies, smoky whiskies, should I say. And that's because of the way we make up our peated and extra peated recipe. So for a peated recipe, we use approximately 25% of our smoked peated barley, our peated barley, with 75% of our unpeated barley. That will make up a traditional smoky run. So that's what's gone into this. So we're already bringing that 60 ppm down in the mash bill by mixing it with unsmoked barley. And then for our extra peated run, we'll double that basically. So it's roughly about a 50-50 peated with unpeated barley. And then obviously we have smoketail, which I mentioned at the beginning with Brooks, which is where after we've done a peated run, we're doing an unpeated run and put that stuff separately. So Hakan's our master of smoke. He looks after that. We do 3 peated runs a year and 1 extra peated run a year. That can then be stored for up to a year before it loses any of its potency. And our peating process takes about 4 days. And over that, 3 days. And over that 3 days, the smoke, the peat, the fire, the peat, and the magic ingredient, the magic ingredient, juniper. So we have a wood fire. We've got locally sourced Swedish peat from the Karen Mossen, and then on top of the peat, we have juniper twigs, and it gives just a nice earthiness to the smoke, because juniper itself doesn't actually smoke a lot, but you get the smoke from the peat, we infuse that then with the good, earthy resinousness from the juniper. That's what dries out the barley to give us our peated barley. Up to 60 ppm, reduced down in the mash bill. And that's what we have. So the cask makeup for Svensk Rök is American oak, Swedish oak, all below 128 litre size in cask as well. So small casks, fairly small batch, and Oloroso saturated ex-bourbon casks as well. So you get quite a lot going on there. So you've got some nice sweetness going on from the American oak. We've got a bit of pepperiness going on from the Swedish oak. And then we've got those sort of winey, sweeter flavors going on from the Oloroso saturated ex-bourbon casks as well. And then mix all that in with a smoky recipe, and you have Svensk Rök. So Stu, what do you reckon? Good replacement for one of the heavier peated ones that you would normally put in your penicillin?
I think this is a very good example of a peated whiskey. It's got a fantastic nose straight out the bat. It's you get that lovely smokiness. It just reminds me of bonfires hitting me in autumn nights. You can almost smell the wood burning when you take a sniff of this stuff. It really sits well. You roll it around. You've got some lovely soft flavors. What I like about this is the spiciness when it finishes. It's got a lovely spicy peppery flavor, but then it gives way to a few more subtle flavors, almost like the saltiness, like it is coming from the islands. And it's a cracking dram, and I certainly think it competes with some of the offerings of the West Coast. I would say there's another Swedish one that goes with the peated one, and this just knocks socks off it.
Awesome. No, and that's great to hear. And like I said at the beginning, these guys are not in any way, shape, or form coerced into their taste notes or anything like that this evening. I dragged them in sort of like last minute to just come and help me out. But no, and you're right. And a lot of people get a bit nervous with peated whiskey as well, don't they, guys? Really, I'm not a really big like you said earlier, Steve, as well. You know, with Stjärnrök, you're not really a go-to smoky whiskey kind of guy. So what do you think then? Obviously, we've knocked up the peating level a little bit, I suppose, with the Svenska Rök. What do you reckon?
I think I may have said this once to you before, but I think this is a gateway peated whiskey. If someone tells you they don't like peated whiskey, I think this one would be a good one to try them with. I get where Stu's coming from with the bonfire. It's reminiscent to me of the top deck of a bus back in the early 1980s when you could still smoke on a bus. You get to the top deck and there's that kind of smoke in the air. That's what it feels like to me. But it's the balance that makes it. If it's too much one way, then there's going to be someone not like it. If it's too peaty, the people that don't like peat aren't going to like it. If it has no peat, the people that wanted some won't like it. And they've got and MACKMYRA have got the balance right again. You know, it's kind of there's enough going on that you're not dominated, and that's what I like about it, the balance.
And you're 100% correct, Steve. You know, this is a good gateway into peated whiskey. We get a lot of people come onto these tastings and go, "Oh, that dram's no for me because it's peated." You go, well, just give it a go. Do you know what I mean? If you don't like it, then you don't like it. Fair enough, not a problem. But majority of the people that have turned around and said, "Oh, I don't like peated whiskey," and have then tried this, I've gone away and go, "Oh no, actually, I really do quite like that." I'm not saying that. You can go back to all of our videos previously for the last 2 years, and you'll find all these people saying it in the comments, and then they're not MACKMYRA plants, so that's good. But no, it is because you're going to get some of those West Coast smoky whiskies or peated whiskies that on first you put the glass to your lips and you just get punched in the face with that peat and the smoke. This isn't that. You can on the nose, it's very gentle on the smoke. And on the flavor profile, you get a bit of sweetness first, and then the smoke comes rolling through, as opposed to a big punch in the face. So it's a gradual build-up. Excuse me. So as you get through the dram, you know, obviously the peaty intensity is going to build, but with on your palate. Do you know what I mean? If you think it's getting too much, and you have a sip of water and take it back down again a little bit, you know, and that's why I really quite do enjoy that. So, gentlemen. This is my my last online tasting for MACKMYRA before I finish up with MACKMYRA at the end of the month. Thank you very much, Matt. I really appreciate that. So, guys, thanks very much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. And thanks for the support over the past couple of years by buying the packs and buying the whiskies and help spreading the word for MACKMYRA. It's really been appreciated. So I think a good final question for each of you really would be, Steve, what's been your favourite MACKMYRA dram that you've had?
You mentioned it earlier, Grand Té for me. Approached that one. Didn't expect a lot from it, but was really blown away with the kind of that black tea influence. Yeah. It was just a great dram.
Fantastic. So same question to you, Stu. What's been your favourite MACKMYRA dram?
Well, because I'm always an awkward sod, I'm going to have to say that there's two.
That's fair enough.
The Stjärnrok, I loved that when I tried that for the first time. I just think it's such a lovely, complex dram. And the other one is another one of your additions, which is Björksav.
Beautiful.
And
both from the same year.
Drams. I really do love those two drams. If I was looking at your everydays, Svenska is one of my go-tos. But in terms of the premium ones, yeah, it's either Björksav or Stjarnrok are the two that I go for.
Nice. No, Björksav was really quite popular as a seasonal last year. So we brought that out March last year as the seasonal, as the spring summer seasonal for 2021. It proved that popular. We've actually brought it back out as a core range seasonal now. So Björksav is now always available to buy, which I think is just phenomenal, because we always said we would never repeat a recipe, but Björksav was that popular. We brought it back as a seasonal, as a core seasonal. So you have the core range, and then it's at a seasonal pricing, but will be always available as opposed to running out after 15,000 bottles.
Happy days.
Brilliant. So, ladies and gentlemen at home, thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. Thank you very much to our regular flyers and the people that have made comments. So just to remind you, if you visit MACKMYRA.com, you buy a bottle of Stjärnrök, and enter the code Stjärnrök40, you'll get 40% off a bottle of the core range. Okay, so Stjärnrök40 until midnight tonight will work on MACKMYRA.com, and you'll get buy a bottle of Stjärnrök and get 40% off a bottle of the core range. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks for joining us. And that just leaves me to say an emotional farewell. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, ladies and gentlemen. Steve, Stu, thank you very much for being part of my last show. It's really much appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen at home, thank you very much. Good evening and skål.
Skål.